Hello! It's finally time. I'm actually going to get around to recording my hardest reading challenge you'll ever do, Spreadsheet Tour. The spreadsheet was designed by Q. Full credit to Q for this amazing tracker that is provided for this challenge that she runs. And I've just tweaked it to suit my requirements, and I'm going to take you through how I've got it set up for me. So starting with the bingo board page, I've got my main bingo board here, which is pretty much as Q set it up. I have color coded each row, and then those colors match along the bottom here. So that helps me just find the tab that I'm looking for and kind of cements them in my mind as particular colors. Also to help me with navigation. So these already linked to the individual challenges. And if I click on it, you can see I've also added a back to bingo board link, because I'm using the bingo board as essentially a contents page for the spreadsheet to help me navigate around. I've also added a second bingo board down here. I originally put these progress bars onto the top bingo board, and I found it too busy and a bit too overwhelming. So I just decided I'm going to make that its own separate thing just to chart my progress on each prompt, and I can scroll down and look at it if I want to. You can see I've also put in that I had read my physical to be read down to 17 books, and then I went on the HRCYED trip and I bought 10 books, so that's now on 27. So I have some reminders for myself here because I've changed the colors. I've said bold prompts are purple prompts, so those are the more customizable ones. I've reminded myself to only read stuff I'm excited to read. And then I've got blue prompts, which I think I can do as I go, and I've got white prompts that require specific picks. So a bit of color coding just to help me there as well. And then at the side, I've also got links to help me navigate to these other pages. So especially my tracker, which is highlighted in pink because I'm using the bingo board and the tracker the most probably out of the whole spreadsheet. I've got my stats page linked, I've got my side quests linked, etc. So let's take a look next at the changes I've made to my tracker. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because I'm not sure how big this will show up on mobile, if you're viewing on mobile. So I found the tracker for HRCYED 2, I got a bit of sort of tracking overwhelm. I found it a lot to track. I think it's really good that all the options are included so that you can track as much detail as you want. And I found it was really good to try that out for HRCYED 2, and now I've got a better idea of which things I want to track. I think I just mostly wanted to track things that aren't logged on Storygraph because I use Storygraph, and that's really good at showing a bunch of statistics on how many of my books were audiobooks or what genre I was reading and things like that. So I don't need to track any of that stuff in my HRCYED 3 tracker. So I've hidden a bunch of columns from this, and I've changed some of the columns to suit what I want to track. So the main things that I wanted to track on my spreadsheet were a double prompted version of HRCYED 3 as I go, and to track a single prompted version of HRCYED 3 as I go. You're allowed to use 2 prompts for each book that you read, but I want to see how far I can get single prompted as well. So I can compare that to how far I got with HRCYED 2, which I did. I completed it double prompted and I got to something like 83% single prompted. I wanted to track what I've called diversify my reading, which is the gamification categories. I'll talk more about how I'm approaching that. And I wanted to track the source of my books, so I want to mostly borrow books. And I have given myself a column for the source if I borrowed it. So I've got where I bought it, or if I bought it with a book token, or if I got it for free, or if it was an ARC. And then borrowed, I've got another column to track in more detail where I borrowed it from. That's just because I realized, I talked about this a bit before, I think, but I realized I'm not someone who likes a big physical book collection. I just find that a bit pressureful. and I don't really reread, so it's not worth me owning a lot of the books that I read. So I'm reading down my physical TBR, and I'm focusing on borrowing books instead. That's why that's the focus of my tracking on my spreadsheet. And then countries and areas is the other thing I wanted to focus on. This isn't something that is tracked in Storygraph, I don't think. And this works really nicely with the geocharts that Qwerty has in the stats page of the spreadsheet. So you can see already the world map is lighting up with countries that I've read books set in, and the states map is lighting up for the US states that I've read in. For this, I've also added states visited and countries visited. Obviously, that's like visited virtually through stories or non-fiction books set there. These lists pull from my tracker spreadsheet, and these numbers will automatically update as I add things. I've also put Antarctica. Antarctica isn't a country, so it's not on the world map, and it won't add to this list automatically, but I wanted to mention it. I live in the UK, so I've added a zoomed in map of Europe, and I've also added tracking the countries in the UK, and then also tracking if I read books set in Ireland, because I wanted a bit more detail on that. We'll come back to the stats page. So next I'll talk in a bit more detail about how I'm approaching the gamification. So initially I wasn't going to do dice rolls, and you might have seen on my channel I did end up doing the dice rolls outside in my garden with giant dice, and that was really fun. So I have done the dice rolls now, but I've still also got this tracker on my spreadsheet. So instead of just choosing one sort of diversity tag, I guess you could call it, that fits with the dice roll for that prompt, I've let myself choose multiple. So if a book fits multiple of these, say it's a queer author that is also a non-white author, I can choose multiple in this column. And then I've got a D my R column, which is a diversify my reading sort of count. And that'll tell me how many diversity tags I've read compared to the number of books. And I wanted to aim for at least one per book. So as you can see, I'm like 8 above the number of books I've read. So because several of these have meet multiple of these gamification tags. So this one's a new to me author, has a disabled or uncommon protagonist, and is a queer author or a queer story, for example. So I'm going to allow myself as I go through to, if a book doesn't meet the dice roll, then that's allowed as long as I am ahead in my D my R tracker. I hope that makes sense. So this one doesn't meet any of them. This isn't actually the order I read this one in. I had read a few when I read that book. But because I'm ahead, it's okay for that didn't meet any. Obviously, I'd love to end up with this being a plus number at the end anyway. So we'll see how much of a plus number we can get. I thought that would be really interesting to track, and it would also give me a little bit of flexibility on the gamification, because I think it will be harder and harder to fit ones that meet the prompts and the dice rolls as I get fewer and fewer prompts left. Kind of challenging myself in the way that I want to challenge myself to read diversely, also making the gamification more doable, hopefully. I'm hoping that'll do both those things at the same time. So if I show that on my stats page, then I haven't got any indie books. I've got indie or debut author is one of my options, and I haven't logged any of those yet, so that's useful to see. And then I know like where I need to look more. These are my means acquired and source if borrows pie charts, just to show you those. So library is physical library books. And as you can see, most of my books have been borrowed so far. And this is my table, my chart for the double prompted. So these are the prompts that I've been working on. This chart here, the prompts one is exactly the same as Q set it up. as is this one. I think the month red. I think that was pretty much how it was already. I've changed the author tracking one because I just wanted to look at which authors I read the most. So this only logs if I've read an author more than once. I haven't done that yet, so it only logs it if it has a score of two books per author or higher. So it'll be interesting to see which authors I read the most. I think that's... Oh, there's one more thing. Well, I have some links here to help me. So a states map, because I am in the UK. I actually found out how little I know about which places in the US are states and which are cities and which are regions. I didn't know New England was not a state, for example. And then novels by state are lists on Wikipedia. That's a really helpful resource if you're trying to read your way across the US states. I'm doing my road trip in the UK, actually, and that's partly because I think I'll get enough out of trying to fill up this map. I don't have to do that as a prompt, so I've decided I'll do counties of the UK as my road trip square. And then I've made the totals and averages box here much smaller than it was in the original sheet, so I could fit my UK and Europe specific tracking underneath. I think I'll show you my double prompt log. So I've added my diversify my reading count to this. The total books remaining, and that's gone up by 5 because I got the printing press prompt, which changes the way I do the anthology. Total books complete says 20, but is actually 10 because this is double prompted. And I got this idea to add the percentages of time next to time compared to my progress through the board from someone on the Hardest Reading Challenge You'll Ever Do Discord. I thought it would be cool to have a time progress bar next to the reading challenge progress bar, so I can see that at a glance I'm ahead of where I need to be at the moment for double prompting. And then I've set this up so these all autofill and auto check, so I don't have to come in here and write this in. So this all-in-one view is from the all-in-one spreadsheet, but I find it a really helpful overview, so I just copied that into my individual HRCYED spreadsheet. Yeah, I set up an array at the bottom of my stats table so that these can... I don't know how technical people are interested in going, but I just set this up as an array. It's probably not the most elegant way of doing it, but it's all the way at the bottom of my stats page. So things go there and then they get pulled into either the double prompt log or the single prompt log into the right places. And if that's filled in, this will check off and the count here will go up, and that will update my progress bars on my bingo board. So it's all kind of connected in the great circle of life. And then the single prompt works very similarly. You can see I'm just about on track for single prompting at the moment. I don't think it's going to stay that way, which is why I'm really aiming to do the double prompted one. But like I said, it'll be interesting to see how far I get. And then I've got the bingo board at the bottom. Let's zoom out again so you can see that. So I've got a version of the bingo board down here, and this will light up green automatically when I've completed a square. I'll show you the anthology page. So I've added the color at the top. That is the color of the tab. These are all just to help me navigate around. I got the printing press board blessing. That means I can read any short stories or essays to make my own anthology and then read a further work by that author. So I've read a full-length work by Andy Weir, and I have a short story that I'm planning on reading by him. I have a short story by Rainbow Rowell I want to read, so I'm planning on making Rainbow Rowell one of my authors as well. Same with Amortals. I'm currently reading A Gentleman in Moscow, which is a full length, but there's a short story that is in the same anthology as the one by Andy Weir I'm going to read for that. So I hope that makes sense. And that's why it added 5 to my total books, because minus the 1 anthology and plus the 6 is an additional 5. I will show you my side quests tracker. So a lot of people have made their own versions of this. If you go to the HRCYED Discord and the Spreadsheet specific channel, there's a bunch of people that are only too happy to help. Like if you're basing it off Q's spreadsheet, if you're Googling how to do stuff, that's just another great resource for, I want to track this in this way. How do you do that? Or just seeing the cool things people are doing. And I shared this version of the side quest tracking in there, and a bunch of people have shared their versions of it. So you can just find one that looks right for you and save a copy of it and put it in your spreadsheet if you want to. So I have like a shopping list of the quest rewards that I'm interested in. I don't have all of them in here. And then these are the ones that you can use twice in total, and these are the ones that you can only use once. So I know once those are full, I can't get that reward anymore. And then I've got the months down here, and then the quest book, the reward book, and when I've completed and when I've redeemed it. I did add a space for all the covers because, I need that sweet dopamine from seeing the covers all fill up. It's so pretty. I really enjoy that part of the spreadsheet. And I've put myself little boxes underneath to tick when submitted, because that is a separate form. Actually, I have submitted this one, so let's tick it. So that I know when I have submitted the form for the side quest. And then, partly because I was waiting to start HRCYED and I couldn't stop fiddling with things, and partly just enjoying playing with spreadsheets, I've probably added a bunch of trackers that aren't needed, that I just wanted to do because I could. Be interesting to see what I find useful and what I want to do again for Artist Reading Challenge 'You'll Ever Do 4. So I've got a monthly stats page. Let's zoom in again a little bit more than that. So all I wanted to do for this was to include, and I got this idea from someone on the Discord who's done a more in-depth version of this. I just wanted how many books I read that month and then which prompts I read for. So as you can see up here, I made my own custom formula for this, but it just filters each book that I read in that month. It looks for that month in the month column, and then it tells me the prompts that I read that book for, and it just filters the unique ones so that I just get each one I read for that month once in this list, and then that's the same for each month going along. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves, I think. And if it's not interesting, then I won't bother tracking it next time. But I thought that was, I think, as I said, I think I tend to take quite a scattergun approach to start with and read across a lot of prompts, and to try to read across a lot of prompts that I think I'm going to struggle to fill in later, or that I can at least get an early start on. So yeah, I'm interested to see like if I focus on certain prompts in certain months. I really like the idea other people have had of reading birthday prompts in your birthday month. So it'll be interesting for me, I think, but we will see. Possibilities. So this pulls through the author and the title from my tracker, and then I've added a column for each. There is a different version of this that's been shared on the Discord, but I wanted to do mine this way. There's a column for each square, and then I've just put notes in, or I've chosen from the drop-down box where it could fit in, so that if I need to move things around later I can. But I also find myself using this a lot when I'm entering a book in the log. So I'll put it in my tracker, I'll just put in the title and the author and the month, and then when I get to the prompts, choosing the prompts to put it in for, I go to the possibilities page and I go all the way along and fill it in, and then I feel like I have a better idea which prompts I'm choosing from that it could fit into, and I try to put it in the ones that I think will be hardest to fill. And then I go back and I fill in the rest of my tracker for that book. And that's been working well for me so far. I have my to-read list. So I'm in a few book groups and a few challenges. So I keep notes in here of what prompts it could work for, and what other clubs or like gamification tags that it could work for. And then I also put the source and the format. And I find that really helpful because I aim to read either an ebook or a physical book and an audiobook at a time. So ideally just 2 books on the go at one time. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that has this problem. At the moment I'm reading like 4 books. But the idea being that when I finish an audiobook, then I have space to start reading another audiobook, and I can filter this by, well, I find just sorting it A to Z is the easiest actually, but you can filter the column or you can just sort A to Z, and then I've got all the audiobooks together and all the ebooks together and all the physical books together. And I can also, if I sort this A to Z or filter it by value, but if I sort it A to Z, then I get all of the unread ones at the top, and then I get a big blank bit, and then I get all of the read ones all the way at the bottom, which is fine because I don't need to look at those if I'm choosing the next book to read. And then I can choose, like I've got 4 on here, that could be my next audiobook, for example. I also made a Shiritori Helper. So I did plan a Shiritori that is you only need to have each book. So Shiritori is one of the squares on the bingo board. The last letter of the first book needs to be the first letter of the second book, and so on, in a chain of 5 books. And you can do a harder version of this where the last word of the first book is the first word of the second book title. And I've planned out a series of 5 titles, but I know that I'm bad at sticking to a list. As soon as I make a list like that, immediately I'm going to want to read something else. So, as insurance, I made myself a Shiritori Helper that pulls the titles from my tracker and puts them here with no punctuation or capital letters and the hyphens taken out and things like that. Everything that counts as one word, because a hyphenated word counts as one word, will appear as one word in column A. And then I have the first word and the last word. Well, the first word excluding a, an, and the, because you can ignore articles. And I've hidden in here the actual first word and second word. So I've told it, if the first word is a, an, or the, please take the second word as the first word for column D. And that's working nicely. And then the last word. And then this compares with the other first and last words, so I can find out how many that title can go after, how many it can go before if it has no matches, or this will also tell me if it could be a potential middle, end, or beginning, and it'll color code those. I don't have an example of it working because I don't have any matches yet, but I tried it on my to-read list in another spreadsheet, and it works, and that'll help me find any potential substitutes or a potential different Shiritori chain. And at least with that one, if I don't manage to do the word version, I can probably slot in ones to do the letter version and still complete the prompt. But I enjoyed figuring out how to make the Shiritori Helper. That was a lot of fun for me. And I shared it with other people that hopefully will find it helpful. And then have I got anything on hidden that I've got a page for authors I want to read more from, which is just a list. And I've got a series tracker. So I'll show you my series tracker while we're here, which isn't to do with HRCYED specifically, but I just like to keep everything in one place, so it's in this spreadsheet too. So I've got these little book emojis over here to show how many I've got left to read in the series. And then here I choose the book that I am on out of the series. So these all pull from over here where I've listed the series title, and then I cross through the books that I've read. And then these go into the drop-down lists for me over here. I did originally have it as each square was a title, and I find this a lot clearer just having drop-down lists and having all the titles in one cell. So it just says the one that I'm due to read next. And then I've started filling in the prompts that I've read for. and trying to slot them in above the dice rolls. But I'm happy to answer any questions about how I'm tracking things or why I'm tracking things the way that I am tracking things. I don't have capacity to do like specific spreadsheet support, but like I said, there's a channel on the Discord that's really great for that, and I'll link to all of Q's stuff in the description. Q does actually offer custom spreadsheets as a paid service, which, as I say, I don't have capacity to do, but if there's a specific spreadsheet you want, there's a possibility that Q might have capacity to do it on a paid basis. Thank you for joining me, and happy HRCYEDing.